What's going on, guys? Welcome to this new episode of Shaws and Kings. It's your boy Shaheen out here with Keith and Weapon X, and today we decided to talk about guns. And I'm gonna let Keith lead the discussion today. Go ahead.
All right. So we're going to be talking about not just guns, but the Second Amendment in general, what it means to each of us, self-defense, and issues and things regarding it, and see where we go from there. So, Farnoosh, how about you start us off with the discussion because you usually don't end up starting us off.
Neither do you.
Right, but I've done it a couple times now, so
All right. Well, I mean, Second Amendment is basically, from my understanding, the right to bear arms and to be able to have those arms just in case things get out of hand in this country, in layman's terms,
I
so
think
to
what our
speak.
founders meant was we're literally allowed to kill bears and keep their arms. I think
oh
I
wow,
think it's
that's a
I
simple
think
one.
it's yes. I think this whole conversation has been misconstrued
We're allowed to
um,
have hairy clawed arms. That's the whole.
to
That's
defend
the whole point of it.
ourselves.
Yep.
Yes,
There you go.
yes.
Mhm.
All right, Farnish, go ahead, man.
Yeah.
Oh
And
shit.
I mean, it's a topic of discussion I thought that we should all be discussing because given a lot of the talk that we've had lately about things like post elections or even pre elections, things like, you know, rights for individuals. I think this is a pretty important one to cover in terms of, what could happen in the event that certain dominoes fall in this country, so to speak,
Mhm.
and where it is that these rights would apply, and whether or not there are people that are opposed to them. Obviously, whether or not they have some sort of those thoughts, those ideals have some sort of merit versus the idea of actually bearing guns as they're stated in the Second Amendment. So,
Mhm. And I'll just say, like, when I look at the Second Amendment, I don't even consider it about guns. I consider it just about the natural right of self defense and your abilities to do that with any tools you want to,
right,
basically.
weapons,
Right, exactly.
be
So,
they
like,
your hands or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, your hands, blades, hammers, whatever the hell you want to use. Um,
be on
and
air.
hey, man, if you can make it and wield it,
You got
if you're
it.
worthy, then that fair game. Fair game. Um, I
Touche.
do I do kind of draw the line at like tactical nukes. I don't think every civilian should have those, but
Wow, you tyrant. You
I know, right?
tyrant.
I'm terrible.
Ooh,
I
ooh.
know. Um, my whole thing is like there's shall not be infringed, right? That's the line in the Constitution.
Right.
So the fact that people are trying to do that and it's literally written down that you're like don't fucking do that is kind of ridiculous at this point. Like the fact that the Supreme Court doesn't even uphold any of that shit, like they just let it slide, is kind of ridiculous when they're supposed to be the ones interpreting and like providing that the Constitution is actually followed. Um, like for me personally, obviously, like I own a gun, and I plan on getting more. I I'm not like somebody who's like everyone should be able to get any type of gun or launcher or whatever the hell. Like I believe in background checks and mental health. If you're fucking insane or have some issue, maybe you shouldn't be getting a gun. But aside from that, I think people should be able to own most other things, provided they pass those. Um, I think the magazine limit thing is horse shit. It doesn't actually solve anything. People can get as many magazines as they want. It doesn't limit your ammo. Um, Limiting the types of weapon you can use also doesn't make any sense because people who are criminals or who are going to commit crimes or terrorist attacks aren't going to give a shit about what your laws are. They're just going to fucking do them. And if you don't have the capability or the same level of technology in order to fight them, you're fucked. So depending on what state you're in this country, you're less able to defend yourself, and I think that's shitty. So I'll
All
let one of
right. Well, let
y'all.
me take it. Let me take it one step further. I mean, not necessarily a step further, but just want to get your opinion on something
Mm,
because I know it's come up. Actually, legitimately, it's come up in a couple of discussions I've had with coworkers regarding this, and some of them happen to be gun enthusiasts themselves. But How do you feel about limiting the distribution of automatic versus semi-automatic versus non-automatic in terms of the state laws that say where some states will allow you to have an automatic weapon, some won't, et cetera, et cetera?
So that brings us to another point too, with pistol permits and your license to carry, right? So my Connecticut pistol permit and license to carry does not translate to me being able to carry in other states, right? It's not like a driver's license. And honestly, I think it should be, especially when Connecticut has such strict laws about it already. And you have to pass all this shit and pay all this money just to be able to own and operate one legally, at least. I could always go to the Motel 6 and get a gun for free. But, that's different. That's a different story. As far as restrictions on semi-auto versus automatic, I think once you pass the background check, it's nobody's fucking business what you own. That's up to you. What you decide you need personally to defend yourself or your family or your community, regardless, I think that's up to you entirely. That being said, yeah, maybe not everyone needs a grenade launcher. Maybe you should get special access to things like that, where it's like anything that has a collateral damage aspect to it, where you're not going to just kill the intended target of your defense. I think that's a different story. But if you're using a gun, one bullet fires at one target, less collateral damage than me blowing up a room with a grenade launcher. You know what I mean? It's kind of, to me, it's common sense, but I mean, some people think you should be able to own like everything, like everyone needs a personal cruise missile. I don't think that's necessary, but that's just me. They'll probably call me a communist just for saying that, but it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself like a pro-gun progressive. I
that
think
means you're not a progressive, man. Don't you know? Come on.
To be honest with you, one of the reason why this conversation annoys me, and not this specific conversation we're having, like on right now, the second, but in the general narrative, is I think the idea has just been misconstrued, and because I call myself a Second Amendment progressive, but or a pro-gun progressive, but I would honestly argue that like the majority of people on who vote blue every 2 or 4 years or 6 years are pretty pro-gun. It's even like the politicians, like I mean, like I think this idea that like the one party trying to get rid of your guns is just a complete fabrication. I mean, I think there are people who, yeah, I mean, I have heard maybe one person on Twitter, maybe two, like say, yeah, maybe we should like get rid of the Second Amendment. But for the most part, I think it's just that theme is overhyped. And like even in Connecticut, like where we have tough gun laws, I mean, like when the whole Sandy Hook shooting happened, like Governor Malloy at the time, like he didn't ban the guns. like I'm saying, like. And or like so I mean that's just like one issue I have, like, but overall, like, yeah, I believe especially like I was inspired by what Malcolm X was saying in regards to racism, and like the black man has the right to defend himself, especially in a country where they're targeted. And I specifically, or I became more pro gun when Donald Trump started running for president. Just because I realized,
what was
that?
that?
yeah, and like and when he started, like and like hate crimes towards minority community started rising, and when especially like me specifically, because I have a platform too, and you have people who don't like your opinions, and I can't, I especially with the Iranian community, I would advocate that we learn self-defense, and not just necessarily owning a gun, but
Right.
learning, taking some type of martial art. With me was Krav Maga. I took a couple of years of that, and
So you're pro Israel now, right?
I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't. I wouldn't go.
Oh,
that
different
was
can
funny.
of worms. Different can
Yes,
of
yes,
worms.
yes. No,
You know,
but
it really. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was no. I mean, that was a good joke, but I was just gonna say, I think it's not really a black and white issue. Like, I'm for pistol permits. I think the problem is sometimes though it could be like a slippery slope, like shall not be infringed, right? So again, like you yourself said, well, maybe we shouldn't have maybe we don't need to own like grenade launchers, right? Uh,
Right.
but again, like some might say that like you saying that some could interpret that as like you're infringing, or me owning grenades or rocket launchers. And like some people have this argument, like what if the government gets like really tyrannical and stuff? Okay, but on like, and I think that could apply to like some countries more than others. Like you could argue that like that if Iranians had access to weapons, right, if they had access to guns, maybe these ayatollahs wouldn't be around for as long as they have been. But
Right.
at the same time, I fear that in America, the people who say that, uh the people who make that argument, like let's overthrow tyrannical governments, don't really come from the same reality that we live in terms of like like those people were the types of people who like stormed the Michigan Congress, the Michigan Senate, or and
Mhm.
they wanted to plan like televised executions and like kill the Michigan government there publicly on television, right? And just because like she believed in like a mask mandate and like maybe like temporarily closing down businesses until we get the pandemic under control. Now I know, like,
Mhm.
you can have your opinion on like on the planned shutdown, the pandemic shutdowns and stuff, like, but at the same time I wouldn't really consider that as like the type of tyranny that would call for militia groups to come and do televised executions, right? Or
Right.
something I want to ask those people is like, okay, like not those militia groups, but just people who in general say like we need to overthrow governments with these guns. If that happens, like, all right, well, if hypothetically if Donald Trump were to steal the election by, what I mean, somehow, if
Mhm.
he were able to do it, would these same people do something? You know what I mean? That's that like
Well, yeah.
that
That's
is
yeah. I mean, first of all, those people may or may it sounds like you're implying they're probably Trump supporters, those kind of people.
I'm
But
implying that, like, are you actually against government tyranny, or are you just, because then I guess like then you have to define like what are you
what is
like,
government tyranny though?
what is
That's the
government
thing, right?
tyranny to
Yeah.
you? Because like if the government like tries to force a law saying like gays aren't allowed to be married, I mean, like, to me, like, that's tyranny. Are you gonna go out into the streets with guns? Or I guess it becomes
Mhm.
confusing, right? Because again, like, if you're a gun owner, and then let's say hypothetically you were there when George Floyd was being killed, and then you decided to be like a vigilante and then kill the cops who were killing George Floyd. I mean, were you morally justified to do it? I mean, I would say yes, but
Yeah.
uh I mean, I feel like legally that just has a lot of slippery slopes, because then then the cops will be legal, like the cops who survived will be legally obligated to shoot you back now, and it's just gonna, I don't know, like, where you draw it's tricky.
Mhm. For me, it comes down to I think anything you're using, whether it's we were talking about martial arts a little bit, whether it's martial arts, a knife, a gun, anything that you are going to actually use to defend yourself or others. First of all, obviously understand what circumstances you can actually use it in, right? I mean, to a certain extent, even if the laws are uh, kind of infringing on it, you have to kind of have a certain moral compass to you where like what the right situation is to use a certain tool to get your desired outcome, right? Like, and everyone who does own those things or is trained in martial arts also knows through your training with that, you know how to use that to the best of your ability, right? So like if you're a skilled martial artist, you're not going to punch someone in the throat and break their esophagus. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's not what you're going to do to disable somebody unless you're a freaking idiot. You're going to restrain them in some way, choke them
right.
out, submit them in some way
You're not
so
trained
that
to kill.
you're not murdering them, right?
Yeah.
The same thing applies to, I mean, knives are a little different because everyone's going to get cut in a knife fight, but with
Yeah.
guns, right? I think you have an obligation to be trained with that tool once you own it, right?
Right.
That's why I go to the range, right? Like,
But there's also like laws that require you to like to take courses, right? Like you have to know
nope.
how to use it.
That's I think that's part of the problem, honestly. I think if you're going to have things like background checks, you should also have a certain requirement where you have a certain level of training with that firearm. So there are pistol training courses, there are rifle training courses all over the place, right? Um, and that's like if you just buy a certain tool that you're not really sure how to use it, and then you go into a situation where you actually need it, you're a liability. You're not going to be useful in that situation. You know, you're probably going to be
I
more of a danger than the person who's causing the shit.
No, I
Um,
agree with that. I agree with having to have certain courses, certain criteria, a curriculum, if you will, for being able to, excuse me, being able to bear arms.
mhm.
Because if you look at it this way, we don't have those same laws or in the same sense for something like martial arts, right? But
Right.
with martial arts, you have stages and levels. They give you your belts, and you have your levels where which you attain and so forth that lets you know that you're at a certain level. Once you're at that certain level, there's a certain understanding and acknowledgement that at some point you realize now that your hands are quote unquote lethal weapons, and you have a
Yep.
responsibility in the way that you use them, because you know you now can kill with these hands, but at the same time you know what those repercussions are. Say somebody were to get in a fight and they killed somebody in an accident for hitting them in the throat. Now they wouldn't be thrown in prison, but since you actually now have the knowledge and know-how to use those hands as weapons, you're held to a different account level of accountability. They
Mhm.
will go to court. They'll say your hands are lethal weapons. You were supposed to have known what you were doing, and the law will adjust accordingly in terms of how they they pass their judgment against you in terms of what you did, the crime, and so forth. The guns should be the same. Guns, you should be able to go through a level where there is training, where they teach you precision, they teach you how to handle one, how to disarm one, and so forth, so that once you are able to have these guns, which you should legally be able to, in my opinion, at the same time, now they're also being held at accountability. Not only are you teaching people how to use them responsibly, but if they don't, now you're holding them accountable. Say you are trained to use a gun and you're a military guy, and the law says, for example, if someone robs your house, um, like if they're attacking you, yeah, you can have the ability to kill. But say they're not lethal and they don't have a weapon, and you shoot them, for example, then at least maybe you shoot them in the leg, or you shoot them in the arm, or you disarm them to the point where they can't fight back, but you're not taking their life. And if that's the case, then maybe we'd have a lot less people that are mentally unstable or probably shouldn't be carrying guns, and those that are carrying guns will be able to use them responsibly. And if they're not, at that point, we can hold them accountable, and there is very little excuse to the repercussions and the consequences for that when they don't.
Right. I do disagree with one point of that, which is shooting arms and legs. Like it sounds like John Wick thing to do, but realistically, if you shoot someone in the legs, you're going to hit their femoral artery. They're going to bleed out right there. Like center mass, even though there are organs and everything, that's actually the best place to be this as safe as possible to hit somebody in general, because you have major arteries in your arms and legs that if somebody hits that with a bullet, they're dead in like 30 seconds.
No, understood
You know
that
what I mean?
too. I
Yeah.
mean, that would where training would be to come in. See, a
Right.
person like me
Right.
wasn't completely knowledgeable of that. Whereas if someone is trained and they know, they're not going
Yeah.
to be aiming for certain organs like
Yeah,
that.
that's why like legally, if you aim for the head, you're more liable. Like because obviously you're aiming to kill them, right? If you're shooting somebody in center mass, it's disabling the target. It's not meant to necessarily kill.
Now, what if like you have no like military or police training? You're just like a normal citizen, and again, like someone breaks into your house, and I mean, again, it's tricky because your emotional state of mind when someone breaks into your house is, even if you're armed, if there is an element of fear and panic and
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline going through your veins and whatnot, right? And I feel like I don't know if you're really thinking, okay, where am I legally allowed to shoot?
Oh no, you're
You're
just probably
just
gonna you're probably just gonna shoot them. But if they can prove that it's intentional in court that you shot them in the head, then you're fucked.
and I think again
Yeah.
that's the tricky part. Now, um, back to this topic of like what we can own, because again, we are talking about, okay, like no one can have a grenade launcher. Well, I think we can agree
Well,
on that.
I wouldn't say nobody can own them. I just think there should be a more extensive process for owning one than necessarily like a regular gun.
Well, I think with grenade launchers, unless you're like General Mattis, like I
I mean,
I don't know.
ex-military people can own basically any gun that they wanted to. If I don't know if they're allowed to still bring them back, but I know like back in the day, you used to just be able to bring back whatever guns.
It's a certain level of clearance. It's
Yeah,
like
there's probably
anybody can drive a tank. Legitimately, probably anyone could drive a tank, but you still have to have a certain level of criteria to be able to operate
right.
it.
And I think
Even
that
that
goes
is
back to the
tricky.
training argument, right?
But
Yeah.
even that's tricky too, because if you come back from war and you have you have a PTSD, you know what I mean, and then you still have the same gun that you killed people with back in Iraq. That I don't know, like I just see that as problematic.
Right, but that's why you have the mental health screening, right? Because most people still don't come back with PTSD. It's like probably, I don't remember the
Right,
exact statistic, but it's like 15 to 20%. It's not everyone who comes back.
but that's a big number still, 15
It's
to
still, I mean, it's still
20%.
pretty. I mean, I don't know if that's even the right act. I'm just saying, I'm
Yeah,
spitballing here, but it's not like 80%. It's not like 80% of people who come back from war have
right.
PTSD, right? It's different. It's not.
I just I guess like I try to see it as like, you know, like I said, like I agree in owning it. Well, certain weapons and stuff that I think it's
Mhm.
fine. But what I'm more fearful of is like the slippery slopes, and
Mhm.
things that have occurred. Like America does have unique issues. Like you know, the UK doesn't have mass shootings like we do. I mean, like, yeah, I'm sure there's been incidents maybe once in a blue moon. Yeah, I like
Well,
France.
the difference in the UK and like France and stuff is the people just run over people. They don't use guns most of the time.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
they're more inclined to use knives. There's a lot of
They
stabbings
use
in the UK.
bombs, they use knives, they use cars more often than anything else.
right, and like, right, but I guess like, yes, I remember a few years ago there was
Mm.
like that bomb in an Ariana Grande concert, and yeah,
Mm.
like there have been knife attacks, but like that Adam Lanza dude killed how many people that day?
26.
26 people. Yeah, it's hard to do that with a knife. Like I mean, like unless like I feel
Mm.
like you can't running into a crowd of. I mean, running into a school like killing and injuring plus 26 people with a knife. I think it's pretty hard to do, unless the people just put their hands up and
Not
allow you to
well, I
do
mean
it.
not to get too like fucked about it, but I mean if you're killing 20 kids and 6 teachers with a knife, that's probably not too difficult for a grown man. Just,
I
Well,
just feel
even
like
so, we're talking about arms. When we again go
right.
back to what Keith said about the Second Amendment, it could be in any weapon. So maybe
And
you
the other
can't
yeah,
stab 26 people, but you certainly could throw a Molotov cocktail in an explosive place and blow up 100 people.
right. And like with mass shootings, right? You know what percentage of gun deaths that occurs every year is from mass shootings? 3%. 3% of all gun deaths in a year, in any given year, on average, are from mass shootings. Almost all of them, I think it's something like 93%, are just handgun attacks in, major cities mostly. So that's
yeah,
pistols. It's not even rifles. Rifles account for a really small amount of actual gun deaths in the country.
I guess no, I mean that's a good point. And I guess like in the US it's a very tricky problem to solve because guns have always been here.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess like the question then becomes I mean I don't really know how we can fix the gun problem we have in America because I feel like it's already spread out throughout the country and
And it's easy to
everyone
get a gun illegally.
it's easy to
real,
get one legally, and
exactly.
I would argue legally and illegally. I would argue they're both relatively easier to get.
Yeah,
Um,
but I mean, legally is harder just because you need to have a background check. In, I mean, most states you need some kind of. They at least look you up in police databases. They don't necessarily have like a full screening of you, but like
right.
I know like in Connecticut when I went to get mine, right? It took like I don't know a week or two for me to get my screening shit. That they go through like all police departments, the CIA, the FBI, probably
They go through
fucking
the
Interpol.
CIA.
Like
Wow.
well, I mean, they go through like every database basically that they can to look you up beforehand,
Mm,
right? Just to make
okay.
sure. Because who knows, I might be like a arms dealer for the IRA. You never know.
It's just one of those things
By
that
the
they
way, I'm not.
it's just one of those cans of worms that get open up that you just can't close. It's like Pandora's box in a way. You really can't probably completely solve the problem. Let's just be realistic. Unless you're taking some really, really extreme forceful measures. But by the laws of this country, so forth, we can't really solve the problem. What we can do is take preventative measures to kind of restrict it. It's like I know it's not the same thing, but it's like having catching HIV, right? You can't. We haven't found a way to eliminate HIV officially,
Mm,
but we can take preventative measures. You know, we can have safe sex and so forth. With guns, it's like, yeah, we probably can't take all the guns off the streets. Let's just be realistic. There'll probably be gang wars and slews of people that'll be out there fighting for the right to bear arms illegally or legally on the streets, and there'll probably be a little gunfight over it. But I mean, with things like psych evaluation, again, coming back to from war, there should be more efficient psych evaluation. Going back to even something we were talking about weeks earlier, the BLM movement, and the way that cops are trained. Even cops should have stricter and more efficient training because, like you
yeah.
mentioned about in the example that we were talking about someone breaking in your home, Shane, a regular
Hmm.
person may not be held accountable. They'll just panic. We don't expect cops to do that, but they're people too. And in that same situation, they may do that. Now, I'm not making excuses for all cops that have broke the law. Believe me, I think I've made my stance clear on how I feel about cops.
Yeah.
But in this sense, um, I can imagine somebody fresh out of training or isn't continually receiving training or psych evaluations throughout the years to keep track of their continual mental development or degradation, depending on what it is. Um,
Yeah.
in that case, how are we to know that somebody who was fit or sane at some point to sane enough to conduct these duties or efficiently use these weapons is in that same mental state now? We really need to follow up with people, and it should be like renewing a license. Go every few years, get yourself psych evaluated, see if you're fit to carry these guns, and if you are, then you can still bear that right. But it's like people who commit crimes, you give up certain rights once you've committed that crime and you've been convicted. So with these measures, you reduce it. But again, I mean, like we discussed over and over through this conversation, you can get them illegally. There's nothing I can do if some um, kid decides to illegally obtain or maybe even jack his legally obtained firearm from their parents that were being irresponsible. But I can at least prevent people that are currently slipping through the cracks, like people who do have progressively worsening PTSD that are not being evaluated from carrying these guns
Right. And
Yeah.
with, I mean, as
and
far as like
weapons.
training and stuff like that and psych evals, right? Like there's something that came out, I think it was last year, where 40%, something like 40% of all police officers polled were domestic abusers. 40%.
Right.
Those people still are allowed to carry guns every day, right?
Yeah.
Um, they're allowed to do, well, essentially within the law, whatever they want to, as long as they can justify it as a police officer, right? That's fucking terrible.
Hmm.
It's fucking terrible. And I mean, we did talk about this before, but if anything, police need more, first of all, more training because a lot of them barely get any. Like, you'll go to the academy, and then I think they get something on average of like 2 hours of additional training any given year. that's not enough time to actually master your weapon, master any skills, to really know what you're doing to the extent that you should with a job that's so intensive and involves you interacting with the public in that fashion, right? And as far as like psychovals, psychologically, another problem, right? Like we can say like insane people shouldn't be allowed to have guns or do these certain things, but there isn't actually a definition for sanity psychologically either.
Now, I mean, now we're just, I mean, that's that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
It just opens up another can of worms. Like, who is sane? Who gets
Well, I
to
don't
decide
consider
that?
people with
Um,
PTSD insane. They just have an
right,
instability, but they still probably shouldn't have guns either. The
Mm.
right. And I think it. I mean, it probably depends on the like severity of it.
level.
I would say.
Yes,
Because I mean, not everyone has a similar experience with PTSD. I mean, some people who have car crashes have PTSD, and they might be fine owning a gun. Um,
absolutely.
Stuff like that. But like if we get like Shaheen was saying, certain people who think there's been infringements, right? They might not necessarily be correct in that. It's steps taken to protect the public that they see as a violation of their rights, and then they're going into places with guns,
But
right?
I
Mhm.
just think, unfortunately, with like reality for like, this country furthering this path of living in different realities, unfortunately, I
Mm-hmm.
see more and more of that happening.
Yeah. Well, what I
Where
was gonna say is like, imagine a certain person takes power. We can use Trump as an example, right? Imagine if he had said, if you hold these certain political beliefs, you are now mentally unstable and unable to own a gun based on those beliefs, right?
But I feel like in that, if that yes, but I feel like the only reason why that would like trigger like a lot of his supporters is only because of that specific issue. But if he were to say like, from now on, we're just not allowing Muslims into this country, and we're also gonna like
Mm,
force Muslims to live a certain way, would those Second Amendment
right.
people, where are they now? You know what I mean? It's like, so it's
I
just
mean, we can't speak for them either, right? I mean, I'm sure there's probably some of them that are completely fine. Like, there
maybe
seems to be an assumption sometimes with like white Second Amendment supporters, and like people assume that they don't support minorities owning guns, and I think that's wrong.
because it's just they're like the most vocal about it, and they're also like the
They
very
are,
most
yeah,
they're
okay.
also very likely to like go out in public with like holding an AR-15 in a protest for
Mhm.
no reason. They just like it's just like, we're just gonna like stand outside the Michigan State Capitol, like we're gonna storm in,
Mhm.
and holding AR-15s and demand Governor, what's her name, like Whitmer, to
Whitmer,
like
yeah,
to like
to
get rid of
resign,
this
right?
to yeah, like that's
Yeah.
just because they don't like her mask mandate. Like I I like, if this was Iran, I would understand. Um, but it's not. And
Mhm.
I mean, like, and more, and every day that passes, I am getting concerned that we could be heading down that path, because, especially with the last three Supreme Court justices that Trump was lucky enough to put in, like, and they're kind of like, they're we're kind of approaching a more theocratic right wing state. Uh, and again, to me, like, I view that as tyranny. But with those same people who went to Michigan, like, would they stand up? Would they march to the Supreme Court and like and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, Amy Coney Barrett, we're watching you"? Like,
I mean, you would hope so, but also if the problem is, right? I mean, it's not really a problem, but just the way our country is, we're so big, so diverse. Everyone lives different ways. Everyone has different ideas about how things should be run, how things should be done. I didn't mean to make that rhyme. I apologize for that. The You're going to have some people who, a certain thing to them is an infringement. Other people are like, oh no, it's completely fine. Like, I'm totally for that. And especially if those people in Michigan, right, if they have never had anyone tell them that they have to live a certain way, do a certain things a certain way in order to,
yeah,
function as a state, then anything you tell them that does that is going to look like an infringement to them when it's really like a public safety measure.
yeah.
It's not.
But that's an
So
issue too. Like, I mean,
yeah,
that like that goes beyond the Second Amendment debate. That just goes
right,
on to
yeah.
like I don't know, because like I mean, on one hand, like I consider myself an individualist, but at the same time, I believe, we live in a society. We do pay taxes, whether you think it's theft or not. Like, we all
It's
pay
actually
taxes.
extortion, but go on.
But we all pay, like, there's some type of redistribution of wealth to an extent, no matter how capitalist we are as a society. And there's a society at the end of the day. There's a social contract, and you have to
Mhm.
there has to be some measures put in for the good of the common good, the common state. And I'm not a big government guy by any means. Like I said, I play Assassin's Creed, man. Like, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is going beyond like guns now, beyond self-defense, like, because we're just talking about masks and public safety measures like that. But
Right, but it relates. I mean, it's fine. We're not too far
yeah.
off topic.
No,
Mhm.
I just think it's like annoying, and man, more like these people, like where they think that like putting on a mask when you go to Walmart is like the equivalent of like mandatory hijab in Iran, and
Right, yeah, and it's not
yeah,
at all. Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
That's hilarious. I mean, I don't know how you could even make the correlation, but I do understand how those people's mind works because they're sitting here because they've had all this quote unquote freedom all this time. And now that you're actually telling them they can't do something, regardless of it being for, the safety of the public, they go, no, we have rights, we have this. And,
yeah,
it just comes down to that. It's like, I don't know. The situation's apples and oranges. One's is religious oppression, and the other one's someone telling you can't do something because you might be harming somebody by not
mm,
doing it.
right. And that, I mean, for me, it comes back to the same thing with like you can live however you want to as long as you're not infringing on other people's right to do the same. You not wearing a mask is infringing on other people's right potentially to live in general because you could be
right,
spreading a virus. Right.
Right.
exactly, yeah,
That's how I view it. I don't know how you cannot. I
right.
mean, that's
Because
not
it all comes down to like misinformation, where it's like, well, because there's one argument you say, okay, like i I choose not to wear a mask, and if I get sick and die, that's on me, right, from an individual standpoint. But the
right,
problem is it's no
but
longer
it's
about
not
you.
right.
Right, yeah,
Hmm.
and like you know where I'm going with this. So I guess and I think like you raise a good point where you say like freedom to do this as long as it doesn't hurt other people. Well, like
Hmm.
you choosing not to wear a mask, uh, you are potentially infringing on other people's rights and shit.
Right.
So
I mean, it'll go back to say, same example. Like if you were somebody that had HIV, right, and you unwillingly spread it to somebody, then that's becomes apparent. That's something different. But if you're willingly spread it knowingly that you have it and just didn't disclose it to your partner, that's actually considered a count of murder. So
Yeah,
now you bring it back to spreading a disease. Now, if you didn't know you had COVID and it was just this willy nilly thing that was whatever, fine, then you probably couldn't be held accountable for it. You're just thinking that you're holding yourself to like, again, if it happens to me, it happens to me. I die. Who cares? But you willingly know that you may kill somebody by not wearing a mask. Now, I'm not saying that making a debate on whether you should be held to the same accountability as knowingly spreading HIV. That's a different discussion. But
right.
you are knowingly spreading something. Now it's no longer about you. You are infringing on someone's rights the same way you would in that situation. And I think that's how people need to be educated. And that's how it needs to be broken down for them. I get that some people will probably just ignore that fact,
mm,
but I'm putting that analogy out there just to put in perspective for anybody who'd be watching that
Mhm.
say didn't look at it in that manner before. You are willingly carrying. You could willingly, even though you don't know if you have it or not, because it's and some people would say symptomatic. Keeping that in mind, though, you could have it, and if you know that you could have it, then you should not be spreading that to somebody else. Now you are infringing on someone's rights.
Right.
and this eventually just leads to like a societal collapse. You know what I mean? Because like
Yeah.
we have a currently we have a pandemic in the US. I mean, it's almost December, um, where it's gone way out of control. to a point where I don't even know what can contain it at this point in America. Yes, like there are cases in Canada and the rest of the world, but I think one of the dangers, and I'm a freedom guy. I'm pro, nothing is true, everything is permitted kind of guy. At the same time, I think we have to acknowledge that one of the issues that come with this being pro freedom is it does come with cons. It does affect the society. There are pros, but this risk of, and I think we talked about this. I don't know if it was the last episode or the episode before. Actually, it was probably both because we're talking about social media, but this alternate realities that people are living in now, right?
Mm-hmm.
People just wrong information just being flowed out everywhere. And when people act based on the wrong information received, that not all, I mean, yes, it affects democracy to like a dangerous degree, but it just affects people's lives, because now there's a pandemic going around faster than like in this country more than anywhere else. And I mean, hospitals are getting filled up again. Connecticut, like we're back at like 6-7%. I know, Farnoosh, that you're the governor that you love and appreciate very much.
Oh, don't get me started on Governor Newsom. I'm gonna get canceled and kicked off the show like last episode.
Shaheen,
don't get me.
Let's not even go there because I've heard plenty about Newsom from other people. We don't even need to go there.
I just, but I know,
I'm gonna get kicked off the show again.
Yeah. Well, last time wasn't intentional. Last time wasn't intentional. I don't know what happened there, but no, but I mean, like, people are shutting down the states. And you can agree or disagree with it, but like some type of measure does, it needs to be done. And the problem is, like, we can't take the appropriate measure when two sides of the country live in two completely different realities, because like one side will be like, okay, well, this sounds reasonable, or it might not sound reasonable. We could do something better. Like, like what I think Weapon X is kind of on, right? Like we're like, I don't agree with this, but he at least acknowledges that COVID's a reality and something does need to be done about it. Versus the other side that believes this is a hoax and everything needs to be completely open and
it's covering up Pizzagate.
No social distancing, and Obama's drinking the blood of children, and these kind of things. And I mean, it's funny, but it's also like it's so bad. And I don't know.
One of these days we got to get one of those guys on the show.
Yeah, the Earth is flat and also hollow. We know this.
I mean, it would make for an interesting discussion. I think it would draw in some more people too, because I mean, yeah, we have small differences, but they're very small. I think that one of these times we really got to get like somebody with a really opposing view in here, and let's see what happens.
The problem I have with that is, like, I don't mind having
me and Shaheen talked about this a little bit before our election analysis. Actually, I was thinking, like, what if we got like someone who's like an intelligent Trump supporter, and he brought up the problem is, because we live in two completely different worlds, basically, it wouldn't necessarily be a productive conversation. We would get their point of view, yes, but I mean,
just
Shaheen,
tap into the reality. Well, I'm just saying, we would just like, I mean, I'm going to say the same thing. Like, we just basically, all that happens is like, we tap into the reality. Just like, we basically just like, well, a conversation like that would just give us a scope of the landscape of the world that they live in.
Right. Yeah.
But, my theory with Trump supporters is that, like, you're either completely delusional and you've just been fed the wrong information, or if you're what I call, a quote unquote smart Trump supporter is someone who is like probably like in Wall Street, or just someone who's like very wealthy and just wants his tax cuts. I mean, like, they're probably dirtbags, and like they just want the financial benefits that come with a Trump administration, knowing the harm that comes with a Trump administration to everyone else.
Or maybe they think those aren't even real. They might think that's a conspiracy theory that, like, he's harming people.
Well, then you're not a smart Trump supporter. You're just delusional, right? You know what I mean? Like, that just
the expression "take one for the team." I'm going to do that right now. I'll take the brunt for both of you. You said intelligent / smart Trump supporter. That's an oxymoron.
Yeah, it's
take the
we,
hit for
we were
that.
trying to keep as many viewers as possible for niche. Why?
They
yeah,
can cancel me. I'll get kicked off again.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
God.
It's yeah, it's a downward
Let me make
spiral.
that clear, by the way. That's not a diss to Republicans. It's strictly aimed at Trump supporters. I don't have a problem with
Right.
the Republican Party.
That's the thing too. You got to distinguish between like Republicans aren't necessarily dumb, but Trump supporters, there's a good chance there's something that you
Yeah.
believe that's not accurate.
They're missing a
But-
There's a good
chromosome.
chance.
But at
I'm not going to say
the same time,
everyone, but
right? And yeah, sure, there are Republicans like Mitt Romney and the current governor of Massachusetts, and some
Yep.
other governors too, who have like spoken out against Trump, and some of them even voted to, even like the senators, like Mitt Romney voted to remove Trump from office. At the same time, you got to draw the line and hold people accountable, because at the end of the day, um, yeah, like sure, like Biden won, but Trump still got 73 million votes.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
Was this election more votes than any other election previously? Right, like in
I
total.
believe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
It
because
is a scary number. The only reason I look at it, as maybe not as bad as it makes it look, as the numbers make it look, is I believe a lot of people voted for Trump out of party loyalty versus actually being quote unquote Trump supporter. There is a
True,
good
man.
Right,
portion.
there's that.
yeah,
too,
but that's to me, it's like that. How much? When do you break from your party? Like, what does it? If Donald Trump is, to me, it just blows my mind, because like if Donald Trump doesn't break you out of that party loyalty mindset, then what does? I like that's
yeah.
like, because like I mean, like there have been some Republicans, because if you look at the results, yeah, Joe Biden won, but the Republicans were able to like keep the Senate, assuming they win the 2 in Georgia, which unfortunately I think they will. And then and they're able to pick up some seats in the House. So what that tells me is that a lot of Republicans voted for Biden for president, but they just voted Republican down ballot, right? So,
Yeah.
so it tells me that some people were able to break out of that party loyalty. But again, like, I don't understand, like, and I mean, now we're just going, we're further, we're going further down and off topic. But I mean, like,
Going
I
down the
understand.
rabbit hole.
And like,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And I understand the Democratic Party isn't like the most appealing party, but I don't know, man. Like it just seems like the Democratic Party gets like like, because some people say the Democratic Party needs to be more effective at messaging and this and that. And like, yeah, definitely true. But at the same time, it's like, well, if the other, yes, like if the other side is Donald Trump, I don't understand like what the Democratic Party needs to tell you. Like what special gifted up, like in a cherry on top message do they need to really provide you to make you not realize like, okay, maybe this one time I won't vote for Donald Trump? Because to me, like
I think, well, to bring us back to the Second Amendment and just like self defense in general, one major thing they could do is Democrats actually coming out and saying they're pro Second Amendment. Because I know a lot of people who voted for Trump only because he's more pro Second Amendment than a lot of Democrats that they see, or at least that's their interpretation of it. Even though Trump is not necessarily pro Second Amendment, he's passed certain restrictions during his presidency that are infringements. Like, let's not get it twisted. But he's still viewed as more pro Second Amendment than, like, say, Joe Biden or really any Democrat that I've heard of. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard might be a little more pro Second Amendment, but she's not obviously in the running right now anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But you know what I mean? Like,
I think Republicans.
There's an impression of the Democrats as being anti-Second Amendment, and some people are one issue voters, right? And like for them, guns is a big thing to a certain extent for some of them.
I definitely agree that like people who tend to vote Republican, like I think the Republican Party has an advantage here because they have more one issue voters than like than like my side does, right? Like so like with some people they just don't give a shit, they just care about guns, so they vote Republican. Or with some people they have no political opinion but they just hate abortion, so they so they'll vote Republican. So it's always like this one issue with them. But unfortunately with Democrats it's like like a liberal voter, like the candidate has to make sure they check every single box. And if
Yeah.
not, nope, cancel culture. We're not going to vote for this. Well, I'm going to write in Bernie. I'm going to like just write in giant media. I don't know what it is, but I feel like the left has more of that issue where when we vote, it has to be every single box. Now, luckily this year we were able to sort of like, I think Trump fucked up so bad this year in general that I think people were just tired of his shit and we're like, okay, we really have to like get this guy out. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think that's definitely an issue with the Democratic Party right now. And yeah, I guess like they could come out and say they could come out and say like, yeah, we are pro Second Amendment, but at the same time, like I've heard Obama even say like, oh yeah, like we're literally like we're not taking your guns away. I'm for this. I'm for Second Amendment. Joe Biden has said it. Like yeah, every now and then you might have someone like Beto O'Rourke like troll people and say like, yeah, we are gonna come for your AR-15s. But
Oh,
other
beta.
than that,
Oh,
other
beta.
than that, man, I think it's like there's that narrative that like the
Yeah.
right have so successfully been able to like create where it's like they're coming for your guns and then they're gonna put you in these like camps. Like they're so good at that. And I don't know, man. Like Connecticut is like one of the toughest, supposedly one of the toughest gun law states. However, like
Yeah.
we have
And I have an AR-15, so
yeah, like Keith
there you
has an
go.
AR-15. Me and Keith have a mutual friend that has like that owns multiple guns. Like yeah, it
Keith,
took
is
him a
your AR automatic? I'm just curious.
An AR can't be automatic technically. There's no automatic ARs. It would be an M4 then. If it had
Okay, let me rephrase that. Are you allowed in Connecticut to carry a an automatic weapon?
not if you're only if you're former military or police or corrections actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same here. I believe we have very similar gun laws. It's not probably not exact, but it's very similar. California
Yeah.
has some
California
pretty
recently
harsh
changed. I know they recently changed it so
gun
like
laws.
my style AR you can't own like you can't buy now. Like I think a few months ago they changed like a law. So I technically have an AR other. So it's like there are little differences between that and like a full AR-15 legally that make it so I can own that gun and like purchase it and buy parts for it and stuff like that. But I think in California they recently changed it for some reason. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
same gun. It's just
they've got weird things over here. Like for example, my buddy of mine owns an AK, and there's a little pin on the clip. I'm not familiar with the term, but there's a little pin on the clip that would allow you to just easily load and unload. You just press the clip and it drops.
yeah, it's just a release.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
it's a release. There you go.
Mhm.
And we're actually not allowed to have the release on here.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
we
So how do you
actually
take it
have
out?
to. Well, I mean, it like I said, this is a different kind of release. It's like a little pin. It just goes in like this versus like a traditional release. It's like for supposedly to unload the clip faster. And
Oh, okay.
you
Yeah.
know, where it just drop and clip and that versus
Mm.
and they're not allowed to have those. You have and you're also not allowed to make certain modifications to it.
Yeah, there's like small things you can't do. Like, I mean, Trump got rid of bump stocks, which, I mean, I don't really know how that makes sense. I don't know what they do really. Like that affects the way the firearm operates. Technically, I'm not allowed to have a stock on my gun, but I can have a pistol brace, which is the exact same thing. It's just a different name. I don't. So yeah. It's like a little legal like difference that I don't know.
And forgive me for anybody who's watching if I'm butchering any of this. I don't claim to be a gun expert or anything. I just have my minor knowledge.
Yeah.
But
Do you own
again,
any Farnoosh?
I don't currently, but that's because I choose not to because of the people that I live with. Do we have guns in the house? Yes. I personally don't own any, but when I do leave, yes, I do intend to purchase a firearm.
Nice. Yeah,
yeah,
Shaheen, I got to bring you to the range sometime too, so you can
yeah,
try out the.
no, dude, I'm down for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
Once this COVID thing settles down a little bit.
yeah. Thankfully, the vaccine shit looks like it's going well.
Listen, man, I wouldn't do
I
it.
know
Bill Gates is
I know it's a
tracking you.
reptilian
You sheep.
conspiracy.
Don't do
But,
it, man. Don't do it. They're going to inject you with whatever QAnon believes they drink the blood. I don't know,
yeah,
but
the blood they drink the blood of virgin children.
right.
Straight from Bohemian Grove.
Yep. Yeah, the ones that they don't sacrifice to Moloch, the owl god,
Yeah.
they take the blood of those children that they don't sacrifice. And and they're also
Alright,
putting
man.
a microchip in it that controls your thoughts, downloads it to the FBI. It's good, stuff like that.
Fucking
I think
We
that's
gotta have
gonna.
Alex Jones on, but
We're gonna have Alex Jones and then toss Vinny Paz on here too.
oh, dude, that would be so sick.
is Vinny
So
Paz?
sick.
I mean, I know Vinny's big on conspiracy theories. Like, I know that's his thing. But
I
like,
wish
I
we
think-
would have had him on this show because he's a big gut guy.
yeah,
We gotta reach out. We gotta see what he's doing.
for sure, man. For sure.
The AR-15 beam leave you still a stone.
Yeah.
Oh,
All
God.
right, guys. I think this is a
Alright.
good. I think this is a good place to end it.
Alright.
Any final thoughts?
Okay. Well, one thing that I want to say, which I really don't say on these episodes too much, but I probably should say more, is for everybody watching, we appreciate it. Your opinions are valued as well. So for everybody that's subscribing and viewing, please feel free to comment. We do comment back. We do appreciate the discourse as well. If this show could be live, we would do that as well. We'll figure out how to do that in the future. But for now, please reach out to us on our IG or on our YouTube where you can comment, and please contribute to the discussion. I know we had a great discussion last time on one of the episodes. I think, what was it? Which one was it, Shaheen? The episode where we had the bit of dialogue in
That was
our
the election
IG.
analysis, right?
Yeah, I
think
think
so,
that was. Yeah.
What about that episode?
Like we had question and answers, right?
Oh, right.
Well,
right,
we had
right,
questions
right.
and answers, and then
with
we
our
had
viewers.
and then afterwards in the dialogue, we had the homie from Heru debating with the other dude in our
Oh,
Instagram.
right. On the comments, yeah, there was a
Mhm.
there was a bit of disagreement. I think that was for like when we brought Dell on, and
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, no, we appreciate all of that as long as it's civil. So, go ahead, drop a comment. Let us know what you think of the episodes and, whether you agree, disagree, and, continue that dialogue, and we'll respond back. So we appreciate it.
for sure.
I will say
right,
that
guys.
any tool you decide to use to defend yourself, make sure you know how to fucking use it. That's all I ask. Learn how to use your shit that you're going to use. Because otherwise you're a liability to everyone else.
For sure.
And then Shaheen, any final words? Praise Ahura Mazda. Is that
I was gonna say glory to Allah and
praise
joke.
Odin.
Praise Odin.
right.
Well,
Prison.
shall be all those in a few weeks. So
Yeah, it is less than a month.
Oh,
All right,
shit.
man.
maybe
Well,
that
until
should be
next-
maybe we should just shout out that. Actually, no, I don't. We'll make mention of it in an episode. I don't think it's quite enough to actually discuss, but we'll make mention of it.
All right,
Yeah,
word.
get some question and answer from your Iranian fans, and then also
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll see.
All right, guys. Until next time. Peace out.
peace.